Before we get into our talk today, let me ask you a quick question. Have you ever been so mad, so frustrated, and so upset that you literally couldn't help but respond? You couldn't help but react. When I played basketball in middle school, and even some in high school, I would get so unbelievably frustrated and furious at everything. I'd be mad at myself for when I make a stupid mistake, mad at my teammates for not remembering the play or turning the ball over to the other team. In fact, those are some of the only times in my life that I've seriously considered punching someone. Sometimes I would get so overtaken by this blinding rage that I just wasn't enjoying anything anymore. And maybe you can't relate to my exact situation because you wouldn't get as mad as I would about something like that. Or maybe you would, I don't know. We all have unique things that make each of us mad, and maybe extremely mad. But the one thing I think we can all relate to is the feeling or the mood behind it all. And it's anger. It's something that we all feel. Maybe you get angry when your parents punish you for something but let your sibling get away with it. Or maybe you get angry when you just can't seem to learn the new TikTok dance. Or you get angry when you lose the big game because of a bad call. Or maybe you get angry when you find out that your friend is actually talking about you behind your back. Maybe for you, your anger comes from not getting something that you want, or from somebody else not getting what you think they deserve. But whatever the reason is behind our anger, it can be easy to fall into the trap of letting it take over. Of how we respond, of how we act, and how we treat the people around us. When we feel anger like this, we usually respond in one of a few ways, okay? Some of us experience something called outward anger. That kind of anger comes out in the really outward, obvious ways. You lose your temper, you scream, you yell, you get loud, you punch something, or you get physical. When you're angry, everybody around you knows it. You show what you're feeling to everyone around you. Others of you, you have more of an inward anger. You don't necessarily raise your voice or explode, but the people around you still know just how angry you are because of the way you shut down. You go silent, you close off, you cut people out intentionally. Your anger may not be as loud, but your silence is still screaming the way that you feel to the people around you. Now, some of us may even have what's called protective anger. It's a little tricky because this one is anger, but for the right reasons. It can be outward or it can be inward, but it's anger about something wrong or bad or evil or unfair in the world. You see those things happening and anger stirs up inside of you. You want someone to do something or say something to make it right. And lots of great things have happened throughout history because of people who experienced protective anger. Take, for example, Stephanie Freed of Rafa House. She was angry about the injustices of sex trafficking, so she founded an organization called Rafa House. And it helps to restore young girls who've been rescued from this. And maybe you've even experienced protective anger for yourself when you saw someone being teased on social media. The anger got you to stand and act for the person that's being picked on. The anger itself comes from the right place, but it's still about the same thing as most of our other anger. The idea that somebody or something isn't getting what they deserve. Here's what I think is really important for us to understand in this conversation. It's that anger isn't wrong. We kind of talked about this briefly last week. The mood, the feeling, the emotion, it's not a bad thing. But it's when anger starts to control us that has the potential to do more harm than good. So what do we do? How do we manage this mood, the anger that threatens to control us, to hurt us and damage our relationships? Well, we're going to have to take a look for some answers from a guy named James, and who many of you may know was the brother of Jesus. And here's what he said. He said this: "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice." All right, so James started with the question, who is wise and understanding among you? You may have heard that word wise or wisdom before, and to be wise is different from being smart. You earn wisdom from experience. If you're wise, you take what you have experienced and you learn from it. James asked his audience to consider which of them was wise, which of them was going to learn from the things that they've experienced and be different going forward. Knowing more doesn't equal doing more. You have to learn from your experiences. So James started by saying that we can show we are wise by the way we live, by the way we treat other people, by the way we demonstrate our faith in God. Those things will be a sign of the wisdom that's living in our hearts. But if we have things like bitterness, envy, selfishness, or anger in our hearts, then our actions, our words, and our responses will show that instead. Any place in our hearts that's filled with those things is where James says we'll find disorder and evil. And if we allow those things to exist in our hearts, then they will come out in our lives in the form of anger. And that can have a lot of potential to cause a lot of hurt, both to us and to others. And here's the deal. Anger itself isn't bad, but what we do with it could be. See, when it comes to anger, we all have a choice. We're all going to have reasons to get angry, but when we're faced with anger, we can control how we handle and how we respond to it. We get to decide if we'll let it be the boss of us. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be ruled by anything. I don't want to be ruled by anger. If you feel that way too, then take a look at one more thing that James has to say. What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? And James wanted us to know that if we want to keep anger from being the boss of us, we have to understand where it's coming from. We have to get to the source. And according to him, that source is inside of us. In James' words, the anger starts with the evil desires at war within us. Now, that's some dramatic language, but I think that this is what James is saying by this. So our anger is about not getting what we want. It's about selfish or jealous or bitter feelings that are fighting for space in our hearts. And often it's about life not happening the way that we thought it should. And all those feelings, the desires and feelings of anger, James said, are battling within us, they're about one thing, and that is control. We have this idea of how life is supposed to be. We want to be in control of the way people act and the way that life happens so that we can be sure that our expectations and desires are met. But as you and I both know, that's just not the way it goes. Our desires aren't always going to be met. People aren't always going to act the way we think they should. And life isn't always going to happen the way we want. And when it doesn't, that can make us feel really angry. Angry at the people around us, angry at our circumstances, angry at ourselves, and maybe even angry at God. And as James said, those feelings can damage our relationships. They can lead to fights and quarrels. And let's be honest, a lot of other negative things as well. Because when we let our anger control what we do, what we say, and how we act, it becomes the boss of us. But remember what we said last week. Jesus offers us a better way. He offers us the freedom from letting our feelings control us. He offers a way to manage all of our feelings. And see, anger does not have to be the boss of you. You may be thinking, well, that's easy for you to say, but when I feel angry, that's all I feel, and it feels good to let it out if I'm being honest. And I get that. We all fall into the trap of letting our anger control us from time to time. But I do think that there are some ways that we can manage it and not let it be the boss of us. So first off, here's one thing we can do to start, is take a step back. When we feel angry, we usually feel that we have to react or respond to every single thing that makes us mad. But the reality is that we don't. Not everything is a hill to die on. We can choose to take a step back, and we can decide not to yell, not to text, not to cut someone out, and we can take control of our feelings and not let anger be the boss of us. That's a big step, I know. But the second thing is this: be honest. In order to understand our anger, we have to be honest about where it's coming from. Like where it's really coming from, deep down. What's the root of it? What is really making us so angry? Is it jealousy or fear or disappointment, or maybe it's grief or pain or frustration? Those not so great desires and expectations that James talked about, try to name them. The next time that you find yourself angry, pause and try to think about why you're angry. What got you to this point? Then talk to God about the reasons for your anger. Invite Him into what you're feeling. Again, God's not scared of your feelings. He can handle it. So bring them to Him. And if you're struggling to understand or recognize the source of your anger, then sometimes talking to someone else is a great place to start as well. And lastly, own your part. This one is really difficult because honestly, I think we all want to blame other people for our anger, like maybe the people responsible for our anger or who we think is responsible. Sometimes we're just mad because we're not in control. But there is one thing we can control, and that is ourselves. Maybe someone hurt us, but then we said something to hurt them back. Maybe something happened, but we did something bad in response. See, those things done or said in anger, we have to own them. We have to take responsibility for those things in order to deal with our anger. When we take a step back, are honest with our feelings, and take responsibility for how our anger makes us react, we're choosing to be wise with our anger. We're choosing to look at what's going on inside of us and making changes going forward. And as we do that, our anger loses its power to control us. It loses its ability to cause us to react and respond in a way that isn't healthy. It loses the chance to be the boss of us. So remember, as we finish out this lesson, anger does not have to be the boss of you. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Stay tuned, and we'll be back with our main service in just a minute.